My dad was a lawyer. I grew up in Samoa, and I grew up sitting on the floor of his office as a kid, watching and listening to him sort of help an endless parade of people who would come and see him. He was sort of known as the man who would take the hard cases, the ones that were unlikely to win, by people who didn't have any money. I used to watch people turn up who couldn't pay but would bring things like chickens. Someone brought a cow once. They'd bring rainbow cake, and I would always want to keep these things, and he would say, oh no, just keep the cow, or no, we can work something out later. And I think years and years later, even when he came to New Zealand, we would still have family members turning up to say, I'm here to pay off that bill from 15 years ago, like we remember, so we're here to make good on when you helped my mum. I had decided probably from the age of, 5, I'd said I wanted to be a lawyer, and my dad always tried to talk me out of it. And then in the end, when he realised that there was, that was it, I was destined to become a criminal lawyer, much like he was. He gave me a talk that I'll never forget, and he just said, if you do this, you must promise me that you'll be the best that you can be, because what we do is far too important to be mediocre. 2012, I moved to Gisborne. So my husband is from Gisborne. We'd had talked for some years about moving there. My son was about to become school age, and we had to think about schools, and we wanted to settle. And I think for me, Gisborne, with its really high Māori population and small community and very committed to community values, reminded me of Samoa. And yeah, I was the one who wanted to move there. And when I did do that, I left the Crown. So I'd been with the Crown solicitors and then Crown Law Office for well over a decade by that stage. And I was ready for a change, and I felt like I had to go to a different district to do it. I couldn't be defence lawyer in the same area where I'd been prosecuting for 8 years. So we went to Gisborne and I changed sides. And what I wasn't prepared for was just the complete difference in when you're part of the Crown, you're part of this quite solid network, pooled resources, all of that. And when you go, you're all of a sudden out in the cold. So at the time, Gisborne had no resident judges. They hadn't had a resident judge for 15 years. I had a client who could only be granted judge-only bail. And so he was arrested at the police station, which is not built for long-term use at all, right? It's not a jail. They said, well, we don't have a judge in town. And I said, when is the next judge going to be here? And they said, 3 weeks. So I said, well, there must be a plan in play. And they said, yeah, we ring up a judge literally on the intercom, like an audio call, because we didn't have AVL back then, and they will hear the bail application. But there's no rostering or anything like that. We just literally will see who's available. And of course, they were ringing around the country, and no one was prepared in their lunch hour or their morning tea to have to deal with a bail application over the phone. So every day I would go to court and say, have we got a judge today? And they would say, no, sorry, come back tomorrow. And that happened for 7 days. So I wanted to write more letters and keep pushing. And as it happened, the AGM was coming up, and basically the local lawyers were sort of saying, well, if you care so much, then you be president. And I went, okay, well, having had no experience whatsoever, I hadn't even participated in a branch council meeting, but I just would collect examples of situations where not having a resident judge was impacting on the rule of law. And then by the end of my 2-year period, I got to make a speech and welcome our first resident judge. And I say first because now we have a second and we're about to get a third. It's really hard to learn how to be a president when there's so much public attention. Not just public attention, but profession are watching. So, okay, previously the president just never had any kind of, the kind of publicity that happens now never happened before. So it's hard trying to find your feet, and also I'm the youngest president with all that going on. That's tough. There was really open public criticism from Māori and Pacific women about being completely left out of the Me Too conversation. And when we did the drill down on the data, it was actually right there in front of us. We realised that number one, it actually wasn't a large law firm issue, because when you went by practice area, if you said, well, what practice area actually has the highest prevalence rates of both sexual harassment and bullying?
Yeah.
It was criminal first.
Oh.
Yep. Family law was second. Immigration was third. Then tax. Then civil. And commercial was right at the bottom. When we looked at the last 5 years, which is that's the statistic you really want to pay attention to as opposed to the long stat. And you ask yourself where are the particular vulnerabilities? It was definitely women aged between 25 and 39, so that wasn't a huge surprise. But in actual fact, ethnicity played quite a significant role. I think it's easy to be judgmental and say, well, I would have done something differently. I think if I look back with the benefit of hindsight, I think the one thing that Law Society could have done much earlier is have that survey, because that was quite monumental, and it told us a lot, and it told us where we should be focusing our efforts in terms of change. I hesitate to say that we are more inclusive, because I think that remains to be seen. I think before you even get to inclusivity, there has to be respect and recognition, okay? And that requires quite a honest, courageous conversation. So that, I think we're at that point, and the inclusivity will come out of action. I think it'll be easier for the next generation than it was for me, in the same way that it was easier for me than it was my dad. And when things get challenging, I think about how hard it was for him, and it was much harder. I think the ones that stick out for me are always the solo mums with, I remember defending a lady who I couldn't think of anyone who was more socially and economically deprived than a Māori woman from a third generation gang family who couldn't read and had a baby. And it felt like everyone was against you and you're the only thing that stands in the way, and that's so every now and again you change the course of a person's life. You do, and it doesn't happen often, so don't get me wrong, it's not like a movie or anything, but it's tough, particularly when you don't win and you watch people like her go to prison, and you watch mothers being separated from children, but every now and again you will have a success and you can see it, it impacts on them. And you would have read the story about the president of Black Power, and that that changed everything. And when I saw Pani, his wife, last year, that's quite powerful when someone says, "Oh, you saved my life." I've been doing that for 20 years. I've been a trial lawyer for 20 years, so I think it's probably safe to say it's in my DNA.